Let me tell you, astrology has taught me a lot of things, but perhaps the most important is that we all bloom at different times. And a rose is no less than a daffodil because it blooms later in the season. And astrology teaches us a lot about our own timing. The midlife crisis, the first piece is Pluto squares itself. Then Uranus opposes itself, and then Neptune squares itself. So it's a complex time. But when Pluto squares itself, if you know anything about Pluto, I don't know if you've ever seen there's an ad on TV for the Titans, the Clash of the Titans,
Yeah.
and he has a unleash the Kraken. You know, did everybody see that? So you get this big monster, you know. All right, Pluto's not all bad, but it has a heavy reputation because in mythology, Pluto was god of the underworld, god of death and dying. Doesn't mean a physical death, but death is a good way of understanding Pluto because when Pluto squares itself, so in your mid-late, for most of you probably about your mid-late 30s, it is time to face your core wound. What haven't you looked at? So at that time, there's a crisis, if you think back. And it may come from the outside. Maybe there's, death in your family, a health challenge, or maybe there's, you break up with a partner, there's a divorce. Or maybe it comes from the inside. Something inside you says, is that all there is? It's a time to look deeply at what makes you crazy. All of those wounds, the family stuff. And if you're doing it right, you do the Pluto work, which means you go into therapy. You do a vision quest, you do the body work, you go in some kind of work on yourself. Not Carl Jung, but Freud had one of the best definitions of Pluto I ever heard, or the 8th house, or Scorpio. And somebody asked him the definition of psychoanalysis, and he said, making the unconscious conscious. That is Pluto, making the unconscious conscious. Going into the unconscious and bringing it to the surface. Facing scary things and becoming wiser. That's Pluto. So the midlife begins with Pluto squaring Pluto. As Gail Sheehy said, somewhere between 35 and 45, if we let ourselves, most of us will have a full-out authenticity crisis, okay? And crisis, as you probably know, in the Chinese language, is made up of two symbols, danger and opportunity. So that's a good definition of Pluto, too. We face something dangerous because it's going to shake our world. We're going to have to change. And you face it, it's not the last time you'll see Pluto or the last time you'll, do the deep work. But that's your initiation into the deep work. In the Odyssey, if you remember, it's when Odysseus went to Troy. That's sort of like the Saturn return. They're going there and they win. They have this big victory. Okay, everything's great, the heroes. Coming back is the midlife. Coming back, nothing goes right. That boat, everything that could go wrong goes wrong. A journey of, a month took years. Journey of maybe it was 3 months, should have taken 3 months. It took how many years to get back? And he just, people died along the way. He had to deal with his worst fears. So that is sort of the beginning metaphor for the midlife crisis. And I think Joseph Campbell said, midlife is when you reach the top of the ladder and find that it was against the wrong wall. Okay? Mary Ann Williamson said, and this is a great metaphor for the Uranus opposition, nervous breakdowns are highly underrated. You can't change something unless you're aware of it. In this instance, Pluto makes you aware. That is like your mid-late 30s for most of us. Young people that are now coming into, 35, 36, they're getting it now. The second thing happens, and that is the planet Uranus opposes itself. 41, 42. This is the peak of the midlife crisis / opportunity. And Uranus was the first outer planet to be discovered. The outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they're so far away, they weren't even discovered until we had telescopes. And Uranus was the first to be discovered in 1781 between the American Revolution and the French Revolution. That's when Uranus was discovered. And so Uranus is the planet of freedom, change, individuation. It's the maverick, the outlaw, the outsider. So most of us are not rebels unless you're an Aquarius or you have a strong Uranus in your chart, Aquarius rising. But we all want to break free of something. We all want to be independent. Where we have Uranus, that tells us where. Okay? Uranus takes 84 years to go all the way around. The friend that I just visited in Carlsbad, he just had his Uranus return at 84. Okay? So at 84, Uranus has touched every planet. And that's a time of full individuation if we're living consciously, you know. But at 41, 42, it opposes its natal position. This is the breakdown, it's the breakthrough. You're restless, you're hungry for something you don't even know. You know, it's like you're living in Starbucks, you're hyper caffeinated at your Uranus opposition. The Uranus, the peak of the midlife crisis, has a reputation, crisis. It's the cartoon is, here's a cartoon, Jesse James, just with Sandra Bullock, he's 40, 41, right? Charlie Sheen, 40, 41. Well, as the poet Rumi says, the pot drips what's in it, okay? So the planet, if you haven't been, doing something awful, it's not going to be exposed. But what the Uranus does, it's time to change what you've been. It's not like in Est, some of you are old enough to remember Est, they used to say, I used to be different, now I'm the same. Meaning, the midlife crisis, not so much about breaking away from something and leaving something, it's going towards something. Where are you playing small and where are you stale? At midlife, there's something, Uranus is the planet of freedom, individuation, authenticity. So there's something in us that wants to be more true to ourselves. So if there's something in your life that's not working, whether it's a relationship or a career, then you need to look at that seriously. I mean, Brad Pitt left Jennifer Aniston at 41, probably wasn't for the sex. If you look at his life now, he's building houses in in New Orleans after the Hurricane Katrina. He's, doing things in Africa, has all these children. He was hungry for something. It wasn't just about the relationship probably, but we break with something and we go towards something we want, and that brings us alive. David White, the poet, says, if there's, whatever doesn't bring you alive is too small for you. So at your midlife, 41, 42, there's a feeling of restlessness, and it's like you need to listen to that. What are you not doing? Where are you stale? This is the time that Georgia O'Keeffe broke away from New York. She discovered New Mexico, and she started spending half of the year in New Mexico. This is when Carl Jung broke away from Freud. It was his late 30s. That was career suicide in Switzerland then, in Zurich. And he had his own practice. He was well known, but he was the apprentice of Freud. He was going to take over this. It was a huge scandal within that psychoanalytical community. It was a budding psychoanalytical community, and he was the star. And he said, no, I can't do it. He had Aquarius rising, so he wasn't going to work for anyone else, and he was not aligned with all of Freud's theories. So he broke away from Freud. But let me see if I have this quote. He said, and he knew a lot about astrology, and he said of that time, it all began then. The later details are only supplements and clarifications of the material that burst forth from the unconscious and swamped me. It was the prima material for a life's work. He wrote that at 41. at his Uranus opposition. All his greatest discoveries, like the archetypes, that's happened after 41. So, you know, 40, the beginning of the Uranus opposition is the beginning of the best time of your life. The 40s, late 40s, I mean, after that is wonderful, but the 40s are really a power time. Mid-late 40s are, you know, it's a very powerful time. But to get that right, Uranus is your teacher. You break away, not so much against something, but going towards something that is more aligned with who you are. Do you remember, everybody see City Slickers?
Yeah.
Right. Remember the opening scene? The guy's having like a midlife crisis. The first scene, it's his 40th birthday. His wife says, "What do you want for your birthday?" He's, "CAT scan," you know? So, and then he goes and he does this, you know, this out west or something, that, you know, at a ranch with the horses and everything. And, you know, he finds
Billy
more
Crystal.
meaning in his life. But, you know, we need to break away from something. You need something new. But again, the classic thing is, you know, breaking away from a marriage, you know, the husband breaking away, going, you know, wearing a leisure suit and going out with somebody 20 years younger, okay? That may not be the best midlife crisis. You know, you have to separate your real desires from your phony desires. That's the key with Uranus at that midlife peak, you know. You know, at every, you know, I love that quote, as Irene knows, you know, the Mary Oliver quote, "Tell me what you want to do with your one wild and precious life." And, you know, we don't just ask that at the beginning, we ask that at every cycle. You could ask that every day. You know, Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, which I love, saw her on Oprah a couple years ago, and she said, ask yourself every day, what do I really, really, really want? 3 reallys. That's the Uranus. I mean, it's every day. I mean, it's our whole life. But to get it right, you go for something that you really want. You go out on a limb. And Uranus is the outlaw. It's the maverick. So if you're doing it right, it may look wrong to other people. That's the thing. You have to be able to do that. You know, maybe somebody gives up a big job in New York on Wall Street, what's left of it, and they go to study to India with Sai Baba, and people say, how could you do that? It's crazy, you know. But you've got to. It's what brings you alive. It's what makes you authentic. At the same time, at the midlife, and by the way, this really sets up what the choices you make at each cycle sets you up for whatever comes next. You know. And by the way, if you're at your midlife, because I know some of you are, and if you're not confused, you don't feel crazy, there's something wrong, because then you're disconnected. Okay? So allow that. Be confused. Be crazy. You know, this is a time to explore. You know, we can't all go on a sabbatical, but you got to give yourself some time to really journal or do therapy or whatever it takes. Because this really, a lot is at stake, because you get it right and you really set yourself up for the second half of your life.